chapel was built in 1876 when the cemetery was established. But this outer stair area here, and when we go in, you'll see that there's going to be 2 rooms off to the side. Those were added at about 1898 with the addition of the porte cochere that's up front as well, that overhang there. So when we come in here, what you're going to notice is you're going to have those 2 rooms that are off to the side. Those were added for additional storage. The idea was that they were going to have coal burning in there because originally they didn't have heat in the chapel at all. So when you come down, just watch your step. These wrought iron gates is all that covered the actual burial vault. In here, step over the spider, leave him alone. In here was the original coal burning that would come up into the chapel itself. However, it took several hours for it to even take the chill off the chapel. And so obviously over time they realized, okay, that's not gonna work. But you can see this is like the outside wall. Up in the corner right here, you can even see the original brick still, the original stone, and then you can tell that this was all added at a later time.
That probably was a coal chute over there where they would load
Yep.
the coal into here.
Yep.
Yeah, because I think my house has an area where I used to have a coal chute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And then, sorry, spider, leave me alone. Aw, poor baby. Well, this one's not as cool. This is basically the same thing, okay? You'll still see the outer wall there. And of course, it's all used as like storage and stuff now. But you can tell the difference between the 1876 wall versus the 1898 wall.
Right.
Coming in here, again, watch your step. What we're using this area now for, because obviously we don't use the burial vault itself, this has become storage. But prior to it becoming storage, what would happen is directly above here, right into the chapel, there is that permanent casket placer. Okay, before there was a permanent casket placer there was a table, so to speak, that would be lowered down into this area here, and you would either open this one here, or there's an opening that's up here as well on both sides. And what would happen then is gentlemen would come in after the casket was lowered to the bottom, and they would find a spot on one of the racks on either side where the casket would then sit for a period of time until they realize, okay, we can go ahead with the burial now. Of course, this was done by hand. This is original. It doesn't work to anything anymore, but a nice little iron cord there. In order to have a spot on one of the vault shelves, you had to be a lot owner. If you were not a lot owner, you did have to apply to have a spot on the shelves here. In order to do that, you were required to pay the cost of a single grave, plus the cost of burial, plus the cost of rent. So, for example, in 1898, the cost for a single grave was $17. The cost for the opening and closing of the grave was $5, and then monthly rent was $1.50. So that was going to be paid before you even had a spot here. Now, if let's say your family decides after you've been here for a month, okay, time for burial, but you know what, we're not going to use the burial vault, or we're not going to use Riverside Cemetery, then what they would do is they'd say, okay, well now we're going to have to charge you double because you took up space for people that could have been buried here. But all of these areas here were almost always lined with caskets. There was a cheaper rate for children. They took up less space. But what I found to be a little, I guess funny is you always hear those stories about people having like, oh, they died in January, they weren't buried until April, and Hans Tiedemann's children were one of the ones that fell victim to that. This is where they would stay. And then of course, like, really good ghost stories come from looking at interment records and not understanding that they would have been placed in an area like this.
Right.
Yep. So, but all of the rest of, like, all of this stuff, all of these racks here, these are all original. These were not ever replaced. They are every bit of 150 years old. This is the area that's always flooded too. That one time when I told you it was flooded, you can see right here, it was flooded all the way up to the top of the first rack right here.
I don't need the light, I got infrared.
See the area right there? You can tell that there was something there,
Like
right?
a chimney,
Yeah. So a chimney was there all the way up until 1988. The superintendent, longtime superintendent, Robert Andrews, he passed in 1988. On the day of his service, I want to say it was in June, on the day of his service, they went ahead, they went through with the burial. It was around the noon hour or so. And as the grounds crew is out there cleaning everything up, almost like cinematic, that chimney crashes to the ground. It was so loud, people felt the trembling under their feet of the brick and stone falling to the ground. It was cinematic, of course, but it was also a wake-up call to Riverside. They realized, okay, enough's enough. Now, this place was boarded up since 1953. They had the last service there. And so the general manager at the time, William Halley, he was like, okay, this was the wake-up call that we needed. If we don't do something about restoring this chapel, that's going to be the end of it. This was just lucky that when it fell, no one was around. But next time, who knows how lucky you'll be. And so in the early 90s, he started the nonprofit foundation, the Riverside Cemetery Foundation, raised all of the funds needed over the course of a couple of years, and started the restoration project. When you look around, you'll see a lot of different tuck pointing things that were done. They sealed up the windows. You can see where the plexiglass is there, sealed up. And the other thing too, that window up at the top right there was original in 1876. This window here was placed in the addition at this time. In original, they only had the one window up there. That was it. It was very dark. But yeah, they did a lot of different tuck pointing, things like that. You can tell around the outside there. These windows over here, new gutter systems. They closed up the windows that were up at the top there, did new roofing. The inside was painted to look like stone. That was actually, it was stone, of course, originally, but it was redone completely so that way we could avoid things like future tuck points on the inside as well. And then I want to say it was 1998, roughly 3 years of a project, the very first funeral service was then held after 45 years with inside the chapel. Since then, we've had hundreds, countless services, weddings. We've done memorial services, and of course our tours, we always start in there as well. Right now, we are not anywhere near close to what they were dealing with in the early 90s, but we are getting to that point again where we're gonna have to start majorly fundraising to replace the roof. When you look up there, you can tell how the roof, there's not supposed to be that space in between those shingles.
Right.
But because of the steepness of the roof and with just having like standard shingles, everything's kind of just started to, dissipate a little bit. So that part is unfortunate. During the rededication, it was decided that all of the efforts done by William Halley, he would have this chapel renamed in his honor. And so you'll see on both sides of the porte cochere his name there, and then there's also another plaque inside. Inside there's also a whole list of the people who originally gave funds to help with the rededication and restoration. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Sure.
So, the dove
Yeah.
up there,
Yep.
what is that?
So the dove is going to be a symbol of like peace. People use doves for grave symbolism often for a lot of different reasons. In this case here, it's peace, it's calming, knowing that you're coming into a place of serenity to wish your loved ones goodbye. On the other side, so everyone always wants to know, why is the angry old lady at the top giving everyone the face? Well, she is. However, history always has a way of changing the meaning of things. And at the time, what it meant was all who pass be silent. Both of those symbols, both the dove and the lady right here, are exact replicas of I think it's an arch at a cemetery in Paris. And so the designers of the porte cochere honored the cemetery by adding both of those symbols there. It definitely gets a lot of head turns. Everyone wants to know where the middle finger came from, but that's what it is. It actually just means all who enter, be silent.
So it's more of a hush, like when you put your, we would
Yep.
use.
Yeah, we would use our finger like this now, but it was like this. Yep. Yep. Architects who built the original chapel versus the architects who built this are two different companies. They got their stone from two different places, and it's almost seamless. If you did not know that this was not part of the original plan, I don't think, unless you were a professional of some sort, I don't think you would come in here and just say, oh yeah, they must have added this later. I've always admired how close they were able to match the original with the addition. Right, yeah, and like I said, I mean, unless you're looking for a difference, just kind of like coming up to it, you really wouldn't notice. Now on the inside, you can definitely tell. We don't have the same weathering, so you can tell because this dealt with outdoor weathering for more than 20 years before this was ever added. So you can tell this doesn't have any weathering to it, and this does. That's the telltale sign. But from the outside, you can't see that.